Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at a really common one with the Valkyrie, even though it's a mech that a lot of people don't really appreciate as much as they should, or could, or anything of the sort. It is a very odd duck in the family of light mechs, and it falls in the same kind of group as your Commandos, Panthers, Jenners, and, well, later on, the Raven, as probably one of the most common iconic mech of a particular faction, this one working for the Federated Suns. Is it a great and fantastic mech? Probably not. We'll go through the different setups and different settings that are available for it, and we'll realize that, well, there's always room for improvement. So let's get into it. When someone tries to look at what is the most common battle mechs out there, you always start with the same three. The tree bugs, the locust, the stinger, and the wasp. The flea is not part of that particular lineup, even though it is also a bug mech, because, well, the flea is only really being built in the Free Worlds League, and some of them in the Capellan Confederation. Locusts, stingers, and wasps have been in production by every single major houses, every single major periphery power, and even the clans in some cases. There's versions of the Locust 2C and Stinger 2C nowadays, and there's no Wasp 2C, at least not officially, but still, the various Clantoman have Wasps available for training. Then you get to things that are a little bit more specific. The Thunderbolt has been built for over 700 years, and, well, it was built by just about everybody as well, and being an incredibly reliable mech, even old 700 years one are still running around. You also have the Hunchback, which were built by only two real faction here. The Dragoness Combine and the Free Worlds League built them, but they built them in such large quantities that their hunched shoulders comes from holding back those two successor states on their back. The Longbow is another one with a long term of production that was built and bought by just about everybody, and there's a few others that would slip in this particular category. Now we can pull back and go back to the light mechs. The Dragoness Combine has two very standard light mech in their lineup with the Jenner and the Panther. The Jenner was produced in massive amounts until the production kind of ended due to unforeseen issues of nuclear origin that were self-imposed in this case, actually. The Panther was in production for quite some time through Alshane and other derivatives, but, you know, both of those have gaps in their production, and they didn't have full-on automated factories building them. You will still see quite a few Jenners and quite a few Panthers in just about everybody's inventory, just because over, well, close to 400 years, those things have been used quite a bit, salvaged by everybody, and sold and resold by mercenaries. The Lyrans on their side have the Commando, which they've been building ever since light mech have been invented, and have been produced in massive amounts by the different factories building the darn things. It is a very efficient harasser/striker, and you can even use it as a scout mech if required. Finally, you have the Valkyrie for the Federated Suns. Taurian was a massive supplier of military equipment for the Terran hegemony, but they also had plants in the Federated Suns and the Free Worlds League, which were member state of the Star League at the time. They had built a brand new, fully automated and fully auto-feeding factory on New Avalon to build the new light mech that they wanted to build. Unfortunately, the people at Arvard Company Incorporated really didn't like how their mech looked because they thought it looked too much like their own Wasp Lamb, and they then started locking down Taurian in a bunch of legal battles, which ended when Arvard collapsed due to the death of the Star League. At that point, Taurian just looked at the legislators in the Free Worlds League and the Federated Suns, and they just give them the big thumbs up to start ramping up production of the models that they had on hand. I mean, in the end, this particular lawsuit wouldn't have gone anywhere if anybody with half a mind would have gone to it, because of a very simple fact. The Valkyrie doesn't transform into a plane. The Wasp Lamb does. The weapons on it, the equipment on it, the extra bits and bobs and all that stuff, even though they were quite similar with a missile launcher and a laser. I mean, you can't really copyright or put a trademark on I've put weapons on a bipedal machine, or the people at Scoble would be making even more money than they were making at the time. Even during the bad days of the early Succession War, Taurian was still building about 200 Valkyries a year through their factory on New Avalon. You had a few being built as well in the Free Worlds League, but not in any numbers quite similar to what we saw there. That's an insane amount for anything that's not a Locust or a Stinger, let's say. The Wasp is not as common as those two. Even when things got really, really rough for the successor states, the Second Succession War and most of the Third Succession War, they were still pumping out about 130 a year, which means about one every 3 days, which is about unheard of for any factory at the time. If you look at the factories building the Atlas as an example, built about 12 Atlases a year. So about 100% less. Not that much, 90% less. But I mean, it was just that crazy. Every military unit in the Federated Suns had Valkyries because they were giving out to anybody with a pulse that had completed a military training. Mercenary commanders with Fed Suns contract could put their name down on the list in order to buy some during the Third Succession War, which was an unheard of thing at the time. If you were a merc during the Third Succession War, generally you inherited your mech from your dad, or if you were lucky, someone salvaged something off the battlefield and you inherited it because you knew how to pilot it and you didn't have a mech at the time and were dispossessed. So, I mean, it was another kind of world altogether. And this is where we started making money. Well, us in general here, I'm talking about the Oregon Trade Alliance here, because, well, the Oregon Coalition had no strong mech building capabilities in the early 31st century, and that needed to be remedied. Flanagan got established right after the Civil War that we had over here, and all the other local businesses all got together, and we realized we needed our own factories for mechs and for other things than just armored APCs. We managed to secure a few licenses for things, mainly the Javelin, but we also got ways of building parts for the Valkyrie because we needed a quick influx of cash, and, well, the people in the Federated Suns needed parts for the Valkyrie. Taurian always had one big issue with their automated factory on New Avalon. They did not make the jump jets locally. The people that were actually making them, Norse Battletech Works on Marduk, fell to the Draconis Combine in 3029. This opened a massive market for aftermarket part and secondary supplier, which is what we, and the Oregons in general, jumped on. We built a whole lot of jump jets and a whole lot of armor kit and a whole lot of actuator kits for Valkyries, which financed building everything else that we needed in the local space in order to keep things going and not be crushed by our neighbors. There was no way we could provide enough parts to replace what Norse was building, however, but we made quite a few of them, and we did sell them at a very good markup, and that is a thing that, well, we're kind of proud of around here. Later on, though, we could not really help them. We had our own things going on, and, well, they were needing a whole lot more parts than we really could furnish during the FedCom Civil War. The realm broke apart, and production issues started popping up everywhere for, well, every single mech that was being built on both sides of that border. Double to this, the fact that the secondary massive provider that they had on St. Ives kind of fell apart when the Catalan Confederation took them back, so getting jump jets got dicey once again. Finally, Taurian struck a deal with Vicor, which managed to get the specs from the Ildco jump jets and build a replacement jump jet, which was basically the exact same thing with a different serial number. And even the people at Taurian decided that, yeah, we'll build a local production line for those and just start building them here. This is all the fun things about supply lines and supply issues that you might have if you're running battle mech factories. During good years here, Taurian on New Avalon still builds about 250 to 300 Valkyries depending on their incoming supplies. With a lot more different modern variety, this go ups and down depending on which variety and which model they decide to build. But the linchpin in almost all of those is always the jump jet modules. After this, the Defiance builds a couple dozens a year as well, due to the fact that they had a license for when the realms were combined. The Free Worlds League portion of Korean Macadam Suarno also builds a bunch. Nowadays, the Clan Spec, because that's where the factory now lies, not in the Free Worlds League, but in the Wolf Empire. And you even have the Taurians dabbling into this with specs that they stole from us. Well, we sold them. Kind of a weird kind of deal. The Valkyrie is probably one of the mech that is the furthest from being extinct. As the kids these days say, the Valkyrie is certainly one of the mech of all time. At 30 ton, it is bigger than most bugs and will be able to outfight them in melee and generally outlast them. The body is made of 6 tons of the good modern armor. I mean, you could probably go and find some commercial armor to put on there, but that wouldn't be a very smart thing. But it is a bit lighter on the head than it should. Normally, you put about 3 times more armor on the head than the internals that's in it. On the Valkyrie, it's a little bit lower than that. So it's just a little bit weird, because outside of those bug mechs, there's very few mechs that do not have maximized armor on the head. The internals are made of a durable and efficient chassis using very good Myomer bundles, and it's easy to fix due to the experience you will have working with them because everybody's worked with them in the past. The engine is an Omni 150, which is common because of the Valkyrie. There's not really any other mechs that use it. There might be a few vehicles floating around using an engine like it, but it gives you a top speed of 86 kilometers per hour, which is generally good enough for a mech like it is. It's also tied to a set of jump jets from whoever can get them to us company brand, and it allows it to jump 150 meters in the air, which allows it to reposition fairly quickly, which is pretty useful. We're going to have to talk about the comm system on the Valkyrie real quick, because the link shirt that it carries is probably one of the best systems out there, and it will allow it to direct traffic in lighter lances and communicate with headquarters as a good scout commander, even though it's not the fastest thing around with its jump jet and a bunch of friends that are stingers and wasps. This is going to be a very good scout commander, really. You have 11 heat sinks, which are generally more than enough to keep it running cool. And for the main weapon, you've got a Devastator Series 7 10 rack of LRM. It's nothing super fancy despite the name here. And you have 1 ton of ammo, allowing you to support all the friendly units from a distance. So while your friends are scouting, you can shoot at the things trying to shoot at them. Once things get a little bit closer, you get a good old classic Sutel 9 medium lasers, or you could pretty much swap it with just about any medium laser on the market as long as you've got the right connectors. Next up is a variant you won't hear Korean talk about, just because it's a little bit weird, and it only exists because of their supply issues. The Valkyrie No Crash, or VLK QA/NC, is a variant that came out during the problems with jump jet procurements. They were able to build more Valkyries than they were able to get jump jets for the longest time. So this particular beast came out every once in a while during production shortages. The jump jet equipment is removed and the engine is replaced with the GM 180 from a Javelin, which is entirely too common and built by GM, which is, well, basically right next door. The superfluous heat sink is also removed because it will no longer need it, since the thing that would make it run hot are the jump jets. Depending on the year of production, you will get different things on there, sometimes an extra ton of ammo, an extra ton of armor. Or sometimes, if you're lucky and you get one of the later models, you'll have half a ton of armor and a case bin for the ammo. Those are never super common. There's a few floating around, and well, I know they exist because we've got production specs for them, because the people at Korean wanted us to build a couple in the Oregon reaches to try to see if the idea was well received. Pro tip, it wasn't as well received as they would have wanted. There was one other variant that was sold on the open market during the Succession War, also known as the VLK QF, or Discount Firestarter. The base equipment remains pretty much the same, an LRM-10 and a pretty good communication system, but the medium laser is replaced with a good old Zippo Flamer, which will make you very, very good at taking out infantry, controlling the terrain by burning things down, generating smoke, which is pretty darn useful, and in city fighting, well, setting things on fire can always be fun. People don't remember often enough that the Firestarter was not a common mech for the most of the Succession Wars. The one Firestarter which is common is the Omni Firestarter. The regular Firestarter from Coventry is not a common machine in any way, shape, or form. So a thing like this that actually had a flamer and knew how to use it was pretty useful during that period. Taurian was one of the first company to have access to an endosteel mill in orbit and a ferrofibrous factory. So with all of that, they started building their new model, the Valkyrie QD, in full production actually in the early 3049s. You had a few prototypes before that, you had a few weird things here and there before, but this is the official production model that House Davion was going to use going forward until they faced the clans. Some of them have a full head execution system, some of them don't. You have to look at the specific year, depends on the production year more than anything else. But the original QD takes advantage of a lot of advanced technology that were getting more and more common at the time. That endosteel, that ferrofibrous, makes it a little bit tougher, you save a little bit of weight, and I mean, there was nothing in the insides of your Valkyrie anyway, so that stuff is going to be using that internal space. You also have a case for your ammo, making this a little bit more tough compared to a regular Valkyrie. The arm laser is replaced with a medium pulse laser, which is, well, you know my thoughts on medium pulse lasers, while the LRM is tied to an Artemis 4 guidance system, which is a pretty good idea. I'd almost have gone with a regular medium laser and more ammo, since it was case protected, but once again, I am not the guy who designed the thing. Now, the Valkyrie QD was okay compared to other Innersphere mechs, but compared to clan mechs, well, they were absolutely outmatched. So ever since then, Taurian and all of their friends have been trying to make better Valkyries. In 3067, you've got the QD1, and in those, every single one of them will have the full head ejection system on there. You remove the ferrofibrous to replace the heat sinks with double heat sinks, which is pretty darn good, and the design also uses an XL engine, making this one a very expensive Valkyrie. The jump jets are replaced with the new Valkyrie models because of the production issues, and you get a bigger LRM rack with a 15 rack there with Artemis, making it a very good bombardment unit, and your arm laser is now a targeting computer enhanced ER medium laser, giving you very good range and pretty good accuracy. Overall, this is probably an expensive but quite decent Valkyrie. As part of their deal to make the jump jets for the Valkyrie, Valkyrie got the honor to produce the Valkyrie QD3 at their own factory. The engine is replaced with a GM210, which gives you the same top speed as a Jenner, around 120 kilometers per hour, and you get a set of jump jets giving you about 180 meters of jump range, so you're a little bit more mobile than a Jenner. The missile launcher is downgraded to a 5 rack of regular LRM with case-protected ammo, but the arm has a pair of ER medium lasers. You get 5 tons of ferrofibrous plates and an endosteel chassis, so you're strangely better at brawling than an original Valkyrie, but you're not quite good as bombardment as the previous one, and it's a side grade and not a terrible one. This is another one that I kind of like, but I've seen quite a few of them replacing that 5 rack of LRMs with a 4 tube of SRM instead. Same kind of weight, it's usually, well, it's doable to finagle it in, and it's going to be quite efficient at that point. The QS5 for 3070 is a side grade using some more modern technology of that era. The cockpit is replaced with a small cockpit, so the pilot has to squeeze it in, and it's going to be a little bit harder to pilot. But this is combined with endosteel and 6 tons of ferrofibrous plate to make it quite tough overall. The arm still mounts a medium laser most of the time, but you have some that will have an ER medium laser instead. And the big attraction on this one is an Artemis 4 guided MML9 with 2 tons of ammo in the torso, giving you a good threat at all range kind of weapon. You're going to be almost as good as a regular Valkyrie at bombardment, and if something gets close, well, 6 SRMs is already bad enough, 9 of them is pretty terrifying. Since the Valkyrie was so common that everybody had some, the Word of Blake actually had their own kit for it with the QW5 that started coming out in 3072, mainly from those factories in the Free Worlds League, or, well, what was left of the Free Worlds League, let's say. It uses a fancier light fusion engine to save a little bit of weight while keeping a little bit more space, and endosteel to get even more weight saving. And you get 6 tons of light ferrofibrous to protect the whole assembly, which is, well, quite meager here. You could go with standard armor, and you probably wouldn't see much of a difference. As with any good Blakeist unit, it mounts a C3I computer, allowing you to share telemetry with the other mechs in your level 2. And, well, it's going to be quite useful here because you've got a medium laser, usually it could be an ER medium laser, and an Artemis-guided MML-7 with 2 tons of reload, allowing you to have good overall missile performance. And then people start asking me, but the Valkyrie is a Davion mech, why doesn't it have an autocannon? Well, let me introduce you to the 3072 Besieged Valkyrie, also known as the QD2, which is a bit weird because we had a QD3 before that was built before this one. Don't worry about that, okay? This one was built on New Avalon during the siege of the planet by the Jihadi and the blockade of the planet by the Jihadi. So it had to do with, well, what parts were available to the Davion military. You keep an ER medium laser in the arm, but you replace the missile launcher with a pair of light AC-2s fed by a single ton of reload. All of the weapons are also guided by a targeting computer, and you use a bunch of weight-saving technology to fit all of that in. Is it fantastic? Not really. Will it destroy tanks? Very much so. That's the beauty of light autocannons on a mech like this. You'll be able to bring it somewhere and start shooting at airplanes, helicopters, and other assorted vehicles, and they're going to start regretting it fairly quickly. It also is able to brawl decently well. You won't have a massive amount of punch, but even with precision ammos, you're going to be able to hit whatever you're shooting at. So there's a variety of good things to do with this one. A little bit later, the Taurian started building their own Valkyrie in 3081 with the QT2, which a lot of people also call the TOC, the Taurian Operation Kit. This one uses a 210 XL engine, making it quite expensive, but giving you a top speed of 115, 118, 119 kilometers per hour. It really depends on how fast you're going. And a full set of jump jets, giving you a jump range of about 210 meters, which is quite significant. The main gun is now an arm-mounted light PPC of Taurian manufacture, and they really like their light PPCs in the Taurian Concordat. And this is backed by a torso-mounted Streak 6 tube of SRM, making this probably an efficient brawler harasser. It's in a different kind of state from the other Valkyries because your main gun is your long-range light PPC, and you've got the backup with the Streak tube rather than the long-range missiles being your primary weapon with the ER medium laser as a backup. But it works quite well, and being decently fast, it's going to be able to get where it needs to be in order to cause damage. And now we get to a whole bunch of icky ones. There's a variety of reasons why they're icky, and most of those were built by Korean because, well, they knew the Federated Sons would keep buying their things, so they just started experimenting and spending as much money as possible because they were being bankrolled. The 3085 VLQ QD5 is going down that particular path using a set of improved jump jets, giving you a top range for jumping of 210 meters. This is coupled with the Omni 150 XL, which is far more expensive than the original, cooled by double heat sinks. All of that to be able to shoot an ER medium laser and an unimproved MML-7. I'm not sold on this one, and you'll see that most of the future ones you are probably not going to be sold on either. We then got an upgrade kit for this coming out in 3101, where Koreans started sticking advanced tactical missiles on it because they had bought some from Clan Seafox. The QD5 takes out the improved jump jets and replaces the gyro with an XL gyro because you need to save weight in some way here, and they add an ATM-3 to the MML-7. Really, if you've bought a bunch of advanced tactical missiles from Clan Seafox, just stick an ATM-9 on there, stick enough ammo for it, and it would be a far better little setup. Of course, Clan Seafox stopped selling the ammo to Aus Davion, and that whole project went tips up, but you've got a bunch of these QD5s roaming around with no ammo in the ATM-5 because nobody knows how to remove it and install something else that would make sense. So since that particular experiment didn't go quite well as they would have wanted, they started experimenting with something else on the next year with the QD6. Now they decided to stick the XL gyro standard jump jets on there, so you had that particular mix there, and rather than an LRM-10, they went with an extended range 10 rack of LRMs in. Extended range LRMs are better than enhanced LRMs in some way. But basically, they've got such a minimum range that you probably won't be able to fight anything effectively with them if they're in line of sight. They're going to be a great bombardment weapon, But even there, I'm not guaranteeing it. You can shoot at things that you can only see with binoculars and maybe one of those fancy telescopes that the sailors have there, but it's going to run you a fortune. It's going to be hard to maintain. Extended range LRMs are not very common, but you know, Korean has to make money somehow. As they kept experimenting, the same year they came out with the QD8, which tries a whole bunch of other things. You now have a Javelin-style 180XL in the body with endo steel chassis, giving you a top speed of 96 kilometers per hour and a jump range of 180 meters. You keep the extended range missile launcher pack on there, but you replace the arm cannon with a light PPC. And the pilot has to squeeze in a small cockpit because, well, you need to fit in all that equipment in. With a light PPC and an extended range missile there, well, anything that gets close to you, you won't be able to shoot, so hopefully you'll be able to punch or kick your way through, but you're a Valkyrie, so the other guy's probably bigger than you anyways. So, once again, this is a thing that is experimented on, spend a lot of money on, and I'm not sure gives you the returns you want. The most reasonable one of the lot was the QDD, which came out in 3106, which is more sensible but still far more expensive than the originals that we saw before. You get a bigger 180 light engine on there and an XL gyro, giving you a top speed of 96 kilometers per hour and 180 meters of jump range. So that's pretty good. It's going to match your javelins, or your standard javelins at least. The cockpit is a normal cockpit, so the pilot is not going to be too squeezed in and too there, and you've got 6 tons of ferrofibrous plates on the body, which is reasonable. I would probably have gone with endo steel, but it's harder to source, and who knows where they went with this one there. You go back to an ER medium laser in the arm and a 10 rack of Artemis guided LRMs in the torso. It's more basic, it's more grounded, and well, that's the one they've been producing in larger amounts recently. And now from the factories in the former Free Worlds League, now Wolf Empire, well, we've got the Komatsu version of the Valkyrie, which is the Valkyrie C. This is basically a second-line unit for the Wolf Empire that they're building so that they have something for garrison units to pilot. The engine and the gyro are XL graded, so inner sphere as well, so a larger engine than you would normally expect on a clan mech, but the body is protected by 5 ton of the Glud clan ferrofibrous, which is, well, an upgrade compared to what we normally have. For weapon, it doesn't go really fancy with a clan 10 rack of LRM with 2 tons of case 2 protected ammo, so it's well protected nonetheless here. If your shot goes through and goes critical and hits those ammo bins, it's gonna blow out the back rather than your entire mech. So even with an inner sphere XL engine, it's not as risky. Your arm mounts a clan medium pulse laser, which is actually a really good gun, so in this case, thumbs up right there. You get a full set of improved jump jets as well, giving you a jump range of 240 meters, which is pretty sweet, until you realize that you could probably have just put regular jump jets in and use that extra space and weight to make the Valkyrie C a little bit better. Maybe give it an ER large laser, you know, something a little bit better. All of those modern Valkyries really mess with something that actually worked, trying to make it a little bit better with very limited results. A partial wing is almost always superior to improved jump jet, as an example, and it wouldn't be terribly difficult to install one on a Valkyrie. One of the guy at Korean I talked to, though, told me that the company doesn't want to do that because they don't want to get sued. And then I try to remind them that the company that would be suing them has been out of business for 400 years. Then they say that Lexatech might try to sue them, and then I tell them that Lexatech hasn't been building the Stinger Lambs since the Nova Cats have basically nuked their factories. It's a whole thing there. Another thing that they could do would be buy Robinson Battleworks Streak LRMs. Robinson Battleworks has been building Streak LRMs for their Atlas IIIs and have been producing in them in decent amounts. They would be able to furnish you with a bunch of them, but Korean doesn't want to have a linchpin that's not in their zone of control, so they don't want to buy parts from a third-party supplier. How about doing the same thing that they did with the Centurion and give us a Valkyrie Omni? All sorts of discussions have been going on, and it's really the people at GM that gave us an actual solution. Now, I'm not going to go in depth about this here, but this here is the future of the Valkyrie, at least from what our friends at GMs have been telling us. The VLK GM, also known as Gym Valkyrie, is a multi-purpose battle mech that is using handheld weapons, a little bit like the Zaku's and the other mechs that have been coming out a little bit everywhere that try to imitate Omni-mechs in a special way. Are those things going to be good? Are those things going to be weird? We're going to talk about that thing in a near future. The Valkyrie really isn't anyone's top pick nowadays, especially in a world where the Wolfhound exists, but it does fit a variety of roles that other mechs don't really have. It jumps while the Wolfhound doesn't. It has some missiles while the Wolfhound doesn't, so it's kind of a thing in its own category. It's also one of the easiest mech to procure still, and it's generally at a price point where you can actually acquire one without breaking the bank. A lot of the modern ones are all over the place, but the basic QD, QD1s, QD5s, there's a few of them that are quite good and at a price point that you can usually afford to spend the money on. And if you lose them, well, you're not losing your house either. You're just losing a mech. So, thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.